Dense forests smother the slopes above Eagle Lake, high in the Rocky Mountains. Far above us, the mountain peaks show a dusting of snow, and despite the spring sunshine, the temperature at this altitude is just a few degrees above freezing. Suddenly, the tranquility of this idyllic scene is shattered by the blast of a train horn, echoing through the trees. And around the bend, we see a Union Pacific coal train making its way from the coal fields of Montana to shipping terminals on the Pacific coast. This is Providence Pass on the Union Pacific's Stanton Subdivision, a 65-mile route commonly known as the Sawtooth Cutoff, which sees trains battle a 1.8% grade westwards from the mountain resort of Fairview all the way up to the Hamilton Tunnel and beyond, crossing the Continental Divide. Join us today as we watch heavy freight and passenger trains labouring hard to tackle the Providence Pass. Local freight services switching industries in and around Fairview. And even a weekly Canadian Pacific potash train making its way to the ports of the Pacific coast. Meteoric Films, in conjunction with No Idea Productions, proudly presents Providence Pass, Fairview and Union Pacific's Stanton Subdivision. Alright, so welcome back to Fairview everybody, and I hope that you enjoyed my little bit of fun with my intro film this time. I've been really inspired by the videos, the Railfan videos of 7 Idea Productions, and I thought it would be fun to try and do kind of the equivalent, a little homage if you will, but based on my own HO scale model railroad. And it seemed a fitting way to kick off this my 2024 layout tour. Hopefully there'll be something of interest to you, whether you're a first-time visitor to my channel or indeed one of my long-standing subscribers, because I'm going to go through some of the changes that have happened on the layout over the last sort of 14 or so months. My layout tour last year was in sort of August, September, so a bit later this year. But I'll talk about where there have been changes on the layout. But actually, in many ways, the bigger changes this last year or so have been in the background. So we're going to start by having a look at track plans and talking about the concept of Fairview at this point in time, December 2024. So here's a map of the railroad Union Pacific Stanton Subdivision, entirely fictitious, and this map is fictitious in as much as there is no such place as Fairview, with a line climbing up through towns like Morgan and Mariposa all the way up to Providence Pass, before then passing through the Hamilton Tunnel and onwards to the western coast of the USA. But what I've done is created this map to help me get a better sense of the line that I'm modelling and how I want it to feel when I'm operating trains. So you can see that just to the east of the town we have the UP line coming in, but joined at Grant Junction by a joint BNSF Canadian Pacific line, which allows me just to route some traffic from those two railroads across my subdivision. Fairview at the head of a valley which opens up into a large long lake right on the eastern edge of the Rocky Mountains. This area, called the Sawtooth Mountains, climbs steadily until we get, as I said just now, to Providence Pass. In my mind, somewhere where early settlers kind of crested the top of the climb and saw for the first time down into the western United States and fell to their knees and thanked God for his good providence in seeing them this far in their journey westwards. Obviously, the railroad then follows many years later, in my mind, typically around the 1880s, where towns had the railroad coming through. But for the moment at least, we'll move on to the track plans themselves. So here we go, this is the main deck as things stand at the moment, and for many of you this will look fairly familiar. Indeed, nothing has changed in terms of the track plan this year, with the possible exception of the addition of the helix. But the eagle-eyed amongst you at least might notice that some of the terminology has changed, the names of one or two areas. And this itself reflects the fact that Fairview is no longer a fictitious town on the real-life subdivision which climbs out of Denver, round the Big Ten curve and up into the Rocky Mountains, going through Moffat Tunnel. Now the points off the layout are to the east, Grant Junction, as we just saw on the previous map, and then to the west, ultimately the climb up to and the line disappearing into Hamilton Tunnel at Providence Pass. So now the staging and the line which climbs onto the main deck proper represents those areas. Beyond that, really nothing much has changed. But if we move on to the second track plan, this is where Fairview has really begun to develop in the last year or so. Aspen Grove Industrial Park, which at the moment is not physically connected to my model railroad Fairview. It's a shelf layout in a different room in the house. But that has really gone from almost bare boards this time last year to something which is, I think at least, becoming quite a fun and sophisticated little switching layout in its own right. Again, we'll have a look at some of the new developments over the year in a moment, but as you can see, it wraps around sort of 2 and a bit walls and has a number of industries. Again, those of you who've seen this track plan earlier will see that there's not very much that's new other than the renaming of Ferguson Refrigeration, which we'll look at again in a moment, and at the bottom of this track plan at least, the addition of a small extension which both allows for some staging but also has created a new area called Juniper Street. So that's it for the track plan. Feel free, if you want, to kind of rewind and pause to study the track plan in more detail. But with that, it's a good time to jump over to the real world, as it were, and actually have a look at the layout as it currently stands. I'm going to switch now to my phone, actually, because I'm going to be fairly mobile. I apologise in advance if the footage gets a little bit wobbly at times, but I figured in the end that was the easiest way to kind of take you with me on a tour of the layout. Just one other thing while we are looking at various aspects of sort of graphics, I'm going to blend in at this point a new logo for Fairview. My good friend Mike, who follows this channel and sometimes comments under the label of Shinohara, I've known him for many years, and amongst all kinds of talents that he's got, he's a marvellous graphic artist. And he's designed this logo for me for Fairview, which really sort of sums up everything about the kind of the background story of the layout, the idea of the line set in beautiful countryside with the rugged mountains all around and so on and so forth. So a massive shout out to Mike for producing this logo for me. The eagle-eyed of you will have seen it's been in the corner of the footage while I've been talking about my track plans, and certainly keep your eyes peeled because I'm going to think of ways to kind of put it into my films in the future. So thank you to Mike. Let's get on now with the rest of the update. So why don't we take a look at how all this kind of maps out in real life. And we'll start at least by looking at the main deck, or rather, just for the moment at least, coming back down underneath the main deck. Those of you who've watched some of my recent videos will know that the helix has been installed and is working fairly well. Still, I think a fair amount of fine tuning that I need to do. And if I just lean over a bit, as you can see, I'm working out how best to squeeze in probably 4, maybe 5 storage tracks, which means that in future for operations I can bring whole unit trains up from this lower staging area. Stand up a second, and along this hidden track to emerge onto the layout proper. Now this switch, which is where the helix track comes onto the main layout, this switch also doubles as the lead which takes us to Aspen Grove, which we'll go and have a look at in a minute. But for now, we'll just make our way around the main deck. I finished off this particular road bridge in the past few months. That was back in the summer, with some 3D printed parts and some plastic card to kind of make the pillars and the retaining walls there, and at least a couple of passes with a static grass applicator. Need to add bushes and things, but that's better than it was. And then as we come around, apart from the fact that if I just pull back slightly, and the line of white along it probably gives it away a bit as well, nothing has changed around here particularly, other than taking away the backdrop photos for the moment while I was working on the helix track. But this white line at the front shows where I finally got round to cutting the fascia to shape, painting it a nice dark grey colour, and then filling in the inevitable gaps along there. Work needed obviously now to re-flock, re-grass that area. But as we pan around into the area that I've called Upper Fairview, nothing's changed here at all. In fact, one thing I have decided I've got to do is improve the lighting, but that's for another time. The yard, nothing changed. Come along past the couple of industries that you will have seen on the track plan, the scrap merchants and the team track there. A little bit further to the ADM corn syrup plant. And then it's just this area here which I've started to upgrade in the past couple of weeks. The Atlas yard office there, something I brought back from my trip to the States, as was the what do you call it, roll-off dumpster truck, is that the right term, which I've now weathered and painted, and the addition of the first couple of 3D printed figures. But this whole area is going to get a bit of an overhaul to make it look even more like somewhere that's being developed. That was a happy coincidence. A pile of rough plaster which sat there for so long that I decided it might as well become a permanent feature. Then in the background there, Rocky Mountain Manufacturing. If I'm honest, one part of the layout that doesn't get used as much as I'd like, only because if I pull back the suburb of Stanton here, with its businesses and gas station and takeaway restaurants, that physically stops me from reaching easily across to the switches and to kind of rescue cars that get stuck or what have you when I'm switching out Rocky Mountain Manufacturing. So that's an area I've got to think about. Technically, this whole scenic board here, everywhere that you can see, which is concreted along there, that's a removable section. It slides out, but of course I don't think to do that in an operating session. Anyway, carry on round. Sorry, that bit got a bit wobbly. And we finally get to Wall Street and then back off the layout. On the top deck, even though it featured heavily in my intro, I'm afraid that absolutely nothing has happened in 12 months or more. I have just sort of jerry-rigged a very crude switch that at least allows me to go between DC power and DCC up here. But as you can see, more of the upper deck is unscenic than finished, although technically this is Eagle Lake now with the new concept, high up in the Rockies and very close to Providence Pass itself. But even that needs some more work. Look, you can see an area there of bare polystyrene foam. The only thing that happened of late was an attempt to see whether I might be able to squeeze in either here the mock-up of the glass plant or a much simpler mock-up of a paper mill with wood chip facilities and things. That's very much early days. The glass plant that you can see there, that's not going to fit. That's for sure. But I'll probably come back to that this year and just see if I can't do something at least with a sort of photo backdrop and a single track for dropping off wood chip cars or something. So there you go, not very much has happened down here. Enough just to keep things interesting, I guess. But it's when we go upstairs and have a look at the Aspen Grove Industrial Lead that we'll see where lots of progress has been made this past year or so. Come on, let's go up and have a look. All right then, so here we are upstairs in my workroom. And this is where the Aspen Grove Industrial Lead has developed in the last 14, 16 months or so. Just quickly pan back here because we've got a shelf that acts as a short bit of staging. I'll eventually put a bit of a mask here, as well as the overpass, which in fact is going to be a double overpass, lanes in each direction, just sort of hiding the area where stage trains come onto this portion of the layout. And you immediately enter into a scene which I've now called Juniper Street. That's the name of the two lanes, two lanes going one way, two lanes coming the other. The other bridge has got to go up yet. Over just a couple of small businesses. That's going to become a hot tub dealer. Not sure about that bright turquoise colour yet, but we'll see. And the Verizon power plant, or what do you call it, sort of transformer array there. And already what you can see as we just start coming round is that I've begun to do a little bit of work just in the last 2 months really on a backdrop. Just very basic repeated trees with the beginnings of some quote-unquote real trees in the foreground, modelled, and continuing to work on this scrubby, rough area. Then as we pan round, we've got a spur which has been abandoned. The switch has been taken out. Small residential area and a currently empty commercial unit. It used to be like a furniture, carpets and flooring outlet, and it looks like somebody is considering taking over that business. Having a look through the windows before we reach North Stanley Avenue. Again, you can see that I've done some work on enhancing the backdrop there, which I think is starting to look quite effective. It's a layer of 2 or 3 different printed back scenes. I'll probably need to just match the colour of the road, something I'll need to do this year. Oh, and you may have noticed looking back on old videos, there used to be crossing plates there, but they just kept fouling the loco, so I've taken them out. I'm going to redo them. But dropping down a bit to pretty much eye level, I think you'll agree that this scene is looking nice now. Pan round a bit further. Again, just a small area where maintenance away vehicles perhaps sometimes just park up. The abandoned and burnt out Crown Victoria car in the foreground. When I first posted that, it got lots of comments. Really interesting what people pick up on. It was a fun thing to do and emphasises perhaps that this part of town is a bit more run down, a bit more abandoned. A year ago, in the background there was actually a model of another fast food restaurant, a Domino's pizza place, but I've replaced that now with this much more nondescript industrial building. Haven't quite decided what's in there, and it's not a priority, at least for now, because it's not railroad served. But that then sort of butts onto one of the bigger industries in this spur, in this industrial lead. This is Ferguson Refrigeration. Last time I did a layout tour, it was still Ferguson Manufacturing, if I remember rightly, and it was just a flat that I'd mocked up on hardboard. Oh, I've just noticed. Sorry, might need to edit that out, I guess, perhaps just leave it in. But as you can see, in the meantime, I've completed the building using a Wolfers UPS distribution centre kit. weathered and detailed, but at the moment at least the lights above the loading bays are non-operational. However, the gates here, 3D printed by my friend Tom, do work, and there's a do not shunt barrel there. So those are little details. If you've read the articles by people like Tom Klimowski or Lance Mindheim's books and videos, you'll know that they are very keen on the idea of these small steps that slow down the switching process, and that's certainly something I like to do as well. Pan round, and the upgraded backdrop you can see ends there. Around here things are much more temporary, but we've got here a business which is international paper, taking in scraps and recycling into paper that can be used again for toilet roll and kitchen roll and low-grade printer paper. As you can see, this one is still in development. We've got some temporary flats and things. And then the layout starts to curve around to the final section. In the background, first of all, Univar Chemicals has one spur for receiving and a second spur for loading and dispatching chemical tankers. And again, this is one which has had various details added in the last, I guess, 12 months or so, probably a little bit longer now to be fair. Still doing work on the track work itself and on things like the loading facilities and so on, but that's coming on quite nicely. Pull back, and we've got just a very short transload spur here in the foreground. Takes plastic hoppers, flat bulkhead cars with various items. That looks like bundles of construction cable. So that keeps up a good variety of traffic. And then just behind that, come round again. Apologies that still we've got my son's old wardrobe door there mirrored with some stickers, but that final spur just curving round, and all a bit of a mess because this area is still very much under development, but that is ABC Building Supplies. So yeah, Aspen Grove in all its glory. I have to say these days, as much as sometimes after work I like to go down to the main layout and just watch trains rolling by, increasingly these days my go-to activity when I want to relax is just to switch a couple of cars up here of an evening. Half an hour, maybe an hour, but not too taxing, hugely enjoyable all the same, and all the more so as slowly but surely the scenic side of things gets slowly upgraded. Right, there you go. That brings you fully up to date with all the developments that have been going on and around Fairview over the past year and a bit. It's been quite an exciting year with especially the developments in terms of the concept and so on, and steady progress has been made in terms of modelling. I was going to finish the video now by talking about plans for 2025, but it's already gone on too long, I think, so I'll save that perhaps for a new video in the new year. Assuming you've made it this far, thank you very much for watching this update. Thank you too for all the comments and the questions and the information and the thumbs up and so on that you've given me over this past year. That's it. We'll kind of wrap things up there. If you enjoyed today's video, please do give it a thumbs up because that helps tremendously. I'm going to do my usual thing of just now cutting to some images shot on the layout. Wish you all a very happy Christmas and look forward to seeing you for some more modelling fun in 2025. Bye for now.